हेलो, वेलकम बैक टू क्रिकेट विद जेमी। मैं ऑफ कोर्स हूं जेमी, लेकिन आज आप देख सकते हैं मैं अकेले अपने कमरे में नहीं बैठा हूं। मेरे साथ एक दोस्त है, एक कॉलीग है, आदित्य अय्यर, ऑथर। He's covered cricket world cups, he's covered FIFA world cups, he's covered all sorts of stuff. Today we're going to talk
Mhm.
to Aditya about his career, but इनकी किताब आई है, published by Penguin Play, Gully Gully. As you can see, it's a play on words. Both the words mean so much. And for anyone who's not just Indian cricket fans, anyone who's invested time, money, effort in traveling, following a team, whatever your team may be, in this book specifically, it's the Indian cricket team because Adi is an Indian just like me, and he gets much of his bread and butter covering the Indian cricket team. This book is set around the 2023 World Cup. All of us will have distinct memories, painful, blissful, all sorts of things we'll remember. But let's get the discussion going by welcoming Aditya on the show. Kaise ho bhai?
Are, thank you so much for having me, Jamie Bhai. It's such an honor, such a privilege. One of my most favorite people in the cricket fraternity. We happen to bump into each other only at World Cups almost exclusively. 2019 to aapko yaad hai, and
बिल्कुल.
2023 as we all remember, for good reasons and bad. But I've lived in this World Cup way longer than a lot of people have. So yeah, I mean, it's such a pleasure, such an honor to be talking to you about it, man.
Thank you. And well done on the book, guys. The book is called Gully Gully. Jo log dekh rahe hain, please go and get your copy. If you're not into walking into a bookstore, it's available on Amazon, Flipkart. All the good home delivery options are there. Guys, obviously, I do not want to reveal too much about the book. Like I mentioned to Aditya before we started, it's a book about cricket. It's about a passionate retelling of the story on a very personal level, Aditya. So much of it, and this is where I want to spend some time of our discussion. You more than me, informing people watching, because इस channel पर Aditya, I get a lot of guys saying sir journalist का असल काम क्या होता है. It's not just two guys looking into a screen. The years that I've been around, the years that you've been around, I want you to, without giving too much away from the book, I want you to sort of give them a sense of what goes through a cricket journalist life. पर उससे पहले the most fundamental question, आए कैसे इस line में भाई?
Complete serendipity, of course. Yeah, I was a physics student in Bombay, and I was following the rat race for a very very long time, as we all tend to do. And I got fed up of it quite quickly. And I was on a bike ride to Nepal from Bombay, where I ended up meeting the sports editor of the Indian Express back in 2009. And he was like, I think you should be here on the desk. And we all love cricket. That's why we're here. And we also like the written word. And I thought this was like a fabulous combination of the two. So there I was as a trainee in the Indian Express, about the same time when you were in Cricinfo. And yeah, life just moved on from there, yeah, pretty quickly. So got to cover some tournaments. We got to see our heroes playing live and also got to write about it. So I was like, what a life. This is exactly where I want to be. It isn't an easy one, as a lot of people assume it to be. You know how difficult deadlines and things like that are, and also the pressure of writing it well, because this is, a sport that absolutely everyone in this country is watching, and you're writing about it the next day. So what more do you bring to the table, or like what more can you offer? So we've all been through that. There's a reason why we've managed to stay here for some amount of time now, is because like we learn to straddle the worlds of being a fan, and also while trying to be very professional and a journalist. This book, thanks for the very very kind words, is a lot about that. It's about what the fan in India goes through when they're trying to watch such an amazing tournament, right? Like it's not easy. It's not like watching cricket in the UK, which we've done, or in South Africa, on some of the smaller countries geographically, right? Like you can get from Potchefstroom to Johannesburg within a few hours, and there's fantastic infrastructure and transport between these two places. Try getting from Pune to Dharamshala with like a turnover of 3 days, right? Like two tier two towns in this country. Not easy, and like the demand is crazy, the supply is not much, and our fans are taken for granted, man. Like all the time, we fill up and we fill up and we fill up the stadium. despite being stripped of our dignity and like our coins and like the loos are not working. मगर हजारों में आते हैं रोज every match, you know, be it IPL or an international, and when it gets as big as the most prized trophy in the game still, which is the 50 over World Cup, being hosted by the country which holds the soul of this sport, you know what it's like. It's not easy. We take it for granted. When I say we, I mean us as journalists, because like we walk straight into the press box and watch it. It's not so easy for that guy sitting in stand B, at just beyond mid wicket. Extremely difficult. I mean, just to get in is such a big deal. Yeah, I wanted to like kind of train the lens towards them a little bit and see what they go through while I go through the same experiences, and see how nice or difficult or whatever it is. It's very enriching at the end of the day.
You talk about being tough getting from Pune to Dharamshala. Try getting out of the Pune ground at midnight, like I was doing 10 days ago. It's absolutely crazy. And exactly, being there, and just for our viewers who are not aware, most centers your media has to get there on their own. There are certain venues like Nagpur and Pune. Coincidence that they're both in Maharashtra? I'm not sure, Aditya. But there are certain host venues, you know very well, कि जब आप कहीं बाहर रह रहे हो और ground बाहर है, so they do send you a media bus, right? And as you just said, it's very easy for us to get an XYZ pickup spot. We get onto a bus, and we're with fellow journalists. We go there, but along the way, as you get to, I mean, I'm talking about Pune and Nagpur because they're fresh in the memory, having covered the England matches recently. But
Yeah.
you see lakhs and lakhs of fans, as you mentioned, passionate fans who are not getting necessarily shuttled there in a bus, who do not get into gate number 4 or 5 VIP, where like the way we do. When you sat down to write the book, and I'm sure your thoughts, as we all do when writing things, get articles or books or whatever, the thought pattern changes. It's like an ode, as you said. It's like an ode to the countless crores of fans. It's also it's a narrative of your own experiences. You mentioned, the fan and the journalist. One of the first things I was taught when I joined Crick Info almost 20 years ago was, मुश्किल होगा बेटा, लेकिन detach the fan in you as soon as possible for a host of reasons. Did you get such advice when you started out? Because, like you just informed me and our viewers, you also came into this line Guma Firake somewhere else, like I did as well. Were you given any such advice? Or if not, maybe that advice, was there one thing you were told which, when you look back now, especially post this book, you said, हाँ मुझे सही advice दिया गया?
Yeah, I mean, spot on. When I first started off, it's very easy to let the the fan in you, kind of like seep
Yep.
into your writing a little bit. That's weeded out pretty quickly in like the top publications. I mean, Crick Info, of course, or the Indian Express, where I was. You have editors who are sitting on you who just give you the right amount of advice so that it doesn't affect your writing too much. But you get it very very quickly. I mean that like if you have to do this, you kind of have to detach the fan in you. The fan in you brought you all the way to this point, right? It kind of like instilled the passion in you, which
Hmm.
continues to burn. But you very swiftly realize that like if you have to write anything of worth, uh, the fan can't be seen. And we saw a lot of them at the 2023 World Cup, kind of moonlighting as journalists. I saw people in
I
their
saw the
jerseys.
reference very well, very subtly put in there in the book. I saw that.
Yeah, it happened over and over again. I thought it's worth a mention because like I said, I hadn't seen it before, but like the landscape of Indian cricket is changing so much. You kind of have to kiss the ring a little bit. We've seen a lot of like people who call themselves journalists doing it now. It's it's such an integral part of our society, our ecosystem, that I thought I'd put it in, which is why the question also, I suppose, right? I think 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been asked or even thought, it wouldn't have crossed our minds that like, should we keep the fan in us away
Correct.
from our writing or our, whatever we do, like if we're doing commentary or we're doing radio or what, all the things that we've been privileged enough to do. It doesn't usually show, but here it has started showing, right? Like in the last few years, there's been a big change in the system. There's also the advent, or I mean, I can't call it the advent, it's been around for a while, but like I think fans have understood how to utilize, in right ways or wrong, social media, and it has made
Yep.
such a massive impact, right? Like, you can directly tell your hero that you're a fan, and you can stand out in ways that a fan couldn't earlier. I mean, so they're all out there vying for their hero's attention, and it's formed fan clubs, and like a lot of visceral hate between these two fan clubs. We know the ones we're talking about, especially in India. I wonder what it would have been like, when Greg Chappell was the coach and there was that whole fallout between him and Ganguly, which kind of drew Dravid in. My God, like, that stuff was rabid. Yeah. Like, imagine what would have
But there is
happened if
no
there was
social
that kind
media.
of pressure.
Exactly. No, which also gets me thinking. As much as the book Aditya is about your love and your experience covering cricket, watching cricket, as well as the fans' view, and you've got a motley crew of people who you speak to. We'll come to them. It is also a brief, I would say, but a sharp sort of take on where India as a nation has itself landed up. Did you find yourself, and you mentioned, when you're writing for top publications, there is the editorial base which you can fall on. Did you find yourself saying, अच्छा शायद मैं इस बार थोड़ा ज़्यादा लिख रहा हूँ, or because you, like you said, social media, you have to be aware of how much you put forth. Did that ever cross your mind while doing it?
No, so yeah. See, when I started writing this book, or when the idea was conceived, it was very simple. I was going to write about this country. It was essentially a travelogue, right? I always wanted to tell the story of India. Where are we best represented as a nation while following something? I mean, it's in cricket. It's the one unifying factor right across this country. There are lots of other things. There's food, there's Bollywood, but they all get like a bit regional, a bit niche. Cricket is not niche, man. The moment like those players wear India across their chest, it really unifies, like, people who otherwise don't really fall under the same bracket, apart from being, a part of this country. So I thought, like, use cricket as the vehicle to tell the story of this country. And if you do that, if you're lucky enough to do that in a tournament such as the World Cup, you really get to really just tell the story, not so much of players and the cricket that kind of writes itself, because they're doing such a fabulous job in any case. You really get to tell the story of the common man or woman, right? And uh, it worked out perfectly, which is why in each place that I travel to, it's a bit like a, like those old school circuses, yeah, yeah, the ones that we used to have in the 90s, Gemini Circus, Rambo
Yeah,
Circus.
yeah. हम तो गायब हो गए यार.
Bilkul, yeah, but now cricket is there. It's taken over from these circuses, no? So it goes from town to town, and the big strobe lights come on, and it really, like, draws the natives in for 3 or 4 days. That little town which has the circus can talk about absolutely nothing else. Then the lights go off, and everything goes back into the caravan, and the caravan goes to the next town, and everything's dark here, and the place is lit up in the next town. Cricket, a World Cup in India is a lot like that, right? When the India Bangladesh match was in Pune, I mean, Pune was a buzz with nothing else but the India game. And that's it. The match got over. Kohli got his 100. And then in 3 days' time, we had to go to Dharamshala and pack up, right? The World Cup continued to exist in Pune, but now the fans in Dharamshala are alive, right? So
Correct.
this way we got to see the length and breadth of this country. We saw the good and the bad amongst us, but it was really a story of the people. And cricket kind of just literally takes you from one place to the next to tell that story. And if you're lucky enough, you'll find people on the periphery of cricket who, cricket can go on without in this country, but they can't go on without cricket, such as
Hmm.
Sarvanan Hari in Chennai, or
Exactly.
Ravikant Shukla in Lucknow. So these
Yeah.
voices, if they can tell me the story of cricket, their journey, and in turn almost somehow also tell me the story of the place they are from, if they can kind of be like, emblematic of that place, yeah, I then I strike gold. And like a few times these guys were nice enough to speak to me, and they were very honest. As you can see, there are a lot of stories on failure over there. There's a lot of
Yep.
stories on kind of being in the background, wanting to be kind of in the center as a fan, the kind of fans we spoke about, people like Sudhir Gautam and Sarvan Haris, like they found a way to be super fans. And
Yep.
what is their story? How did they get there, right? And it's come with a lot of stinging hate and failure and ridicule, yet they're there. And they also kind of, like, Sarvanan really represents Chennai for me, or Tamil Nadu for me. So
Yep.
people like that kind of told me the story of a country where they're kind of representative of fans, and there are fans at large too.
Yeah. No, and that is one of the best parts about the book, because again, we've seen the matches. I'm sure there's certain fans, we as journalists, we will remember the scorecard matches, but you
Yeah.
set up each chapter. And by the way, guys watching, each chapter is obviously one match of India's tournament. It's great. I mean, you start off with Liaquat. It's raining in Chennai. You're on a flyover. It's humid. You set the tone so well. So I'm taking away things like him. Then, as you mentioned the CSK fan Hari accident, the whole job thing, meeting Dhoni for the first time. Then someone like him, I think Superfan is the best way to write it, because
Hmm.
he gets a gig here and there. Then you have guys like the guy Jackie, his name was, the guy who's Tibetan. So all along the way, then there's a Garba for, again, we won't get into it, but please do read that chapter about starting off in Ahmedabad. And there's just so much there. That aside, I was pleasantly surprised, because as I was going through it, I said, okay, maybe Aditya will not go and speak to, I'm not going to use the word forgotten players, but players who've either been on the cusp of playing for India or who played a handful of matches. Rishi Dhawan, the Mandi background. And there's that line where he tells you, क्या था? Cricket बहुत ज्यादा आपको हंसाता नहीं है, दर्द ये ऐसा कुछ देता है, right? Exactly. And that one line is the story of countless Rishi Dhawans. Rishi Dhawan at least got an IPL contract. He got to play, what, 3-4 matches,
Yep.
Ravikant Shukla. If we're cricket journalists, that's a name we've heard about. We've seen Hindu, Sports Star, POI, but didn't finally crack it. Not just Aditya writing this book, but even before the book, in all the years you've done cricket journalism. Are those the kind of stories that, beyond the obvious superstar interviews, the features, those are the ones which give you a certain pleasure in researching and then meeting these people?
100%, boss. I mean, I'm obsessed with the idea and the concept of failure, because there are so many of us in this country, and at the end of the day, about 20 people get to play for the team, the Indian team, at any given point of time. So look at the statistical percentage of failure, right, in the conventional way, which is, there are about 100,000 or 80,000 people trying to play this game in the academies and the maidans and the gullies and the streets, like at a very serious level, with a real intention to play for the team. In the end, 20 guys get to play this, and even once you get to the very top, it's very hard to sustain your living over there, right? Because there are so many better guys than you, or as Djokovic says this in tennis, right? Like, he has the same skill set as most people in the top 20. What makes him marginally better, and that marginally better gives him 24 Grand Slams versus his Zverev winning none, is he's got a better mindset to these big matches. That's it. The skills are the same. So I was absolutely obsessed with failure, which is why when I was in Hindustan Times, I spent a lot of time in trying to tell the story of people who have failed conventionally and humanize them, because Stuart Binney was one of them. He got hit for those sixes in Fort Lauderdale, and you see the kind of like hate he gets on social media, or used to get, because of those sixes, and we lost that match. It's terrible. This guy's done stuff that all those people hating on him, not just them, you and I have never done, right? We've never played for India. This guy made it all the way to the top. And I know there are talks of nepotism and this and that. It doesn't exist in sport, boss. You will get found out. It is unlike a lot of other fields, right? I mean, it's very binary. You can either do it or you can't. To make it there, to get that 6 for 4 in Bangladesh, which he did, which was our best bowling figures for a very long
No
time.
one can take it away from him.
No one can take it away from him. Exactly. And like he says, his real life lies somewhere between that 6 for 4, which is one extreme, and those 36 or 34 runs he got hit for against Evan Lewis. Those are two extremes. He was actually bang in the middle. And once you humanize a fellow, right, like you really get to see the steps he took to make it where most of India will not make it, right?
Yep.
And this is something that's just really stayed with me. I mean, see, man, like at the end of the day, all successes or all stories of successes are the same. You'll get that second house in Pali Hill, and eventually you will do a pan masala ad, and you'll have your honeymoon in Lake Como, right? Sabka same hai, yaar. Matlab, each but each failure is different, right? Each heartbreak is different because they've come so close. People like Ravikant Shukla, some of them like Stuart Binney have made it and yet not sustained their lives over there as Indian players. They all have, you know, very pure stories to tell. And for me, failure is actually the purest story as a journalist. So this book is, of course, like peppered with it because of my obsession with telling this tale of, and even with success stories, people like Virat Kohli, who's possibly the most successful man cricket has ever seen in terms of money and runs and statistics and all of that. Guy has been through so much, which is kind of like now washed over because there is only this very gleaming, happy, shiny, successful facade that he wears, right? But all the failures that he's been through, I'm way more interested in that. So, you know, when I talk to Rajkumar Sharma, his coach in West Delhi, he kind of like, you know, throws a light on what Virat was like when he was one of us at a time when, you know, you've interviewed him for magazines. And I remember one of the, your articles that you possibly did a little later with Virat, where it starts in such a beautiful way. And that is what we're into. And can I please talk about that start where you go like, I think Virat looks at you and says, "We're meeting in slightly different circumstances now, aren't we? In a very plush
Right.
five-star
Yeah.
hotel." Back then, you know, the first time you must have interviewed him was not a plush five-star hotel. It was
Not at all.
uh, reason enough to make the copy, right? So that is what we're into. These guys, they've also used cricket as a vehicle to like really make it in life, and it's the journey of making it that really tickles me.
Yeah. You have a beyond being a fantastic chronicler of cricket, I just want to say that you have a fantastic way of getting out these stories. Where did that come from? Were you exposed to books early? Somebody in your family? How? Because I'm asking the question because I think we belong to the same generation almost, where it was maybe more inculcated either at home or in our workplace. And I fear that young sports journalists coming into the field these days perhaps are not as well equipped to tell stories. So what's your reasoning behind being such a good storyteller? How did you were you exposed to things early?
Thanks for saying that. Firstly, it means a lot. Like I said right in the beginning, when we start writing, we kind of try and differentiate ourselves from everybody else. Because if you're just doing cricket, then what are you bringing to the table? As we said right in the
Yeah.
beginning, right? And I understood very quickly that my forte kind of lies in having long conversations with people and giving them the space and building a safe environment for them to speak about things that are slightly difficult to bring out in any kind of an interview. Be it a Saurav Ganguly who's also in this book and he's been there and he's done that, or a Rishi Dhawan who hasn't done quite as much, right? The thing that connects them when I write about them is about 20 minutes into the interview, are they in a place where they feel safe enough to for like sort of, for example, to talk to me about like Greg Chappell and do it in a way which isn't very probing, like just have a
Got it.
conversation, make sure that the person trusts you. And a lot of these guys don't know us personally, right? So the only way to like build that trust is during the conversation. So a little bit, of course, lies in the skill that you kind of develop over time. It comes from speaking to people a lot, and all these people are really protective about the image, and rightly so, because look how quickly it can fall apart in this country. If it can fall apart for the captain of this country at the moment, the incumbent one, as quickly as it did during the Australia tour, what
Yeah.
chance do people who haven't made it have, really, right? So um, I also read a lot. I mean, what I'm not doing when I'm writing is reading. I mean, for most authors, for most writers, this is, if I can give one advice, which is read a whole lot more than you actually write, and read
Bingo.
stuff beyond cricket or sport, right? I mean, that's where you really learn your craft, your tool, all of that. And I was a reader since I was a child. So fantasy books, whatever, man. Like it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be cricket or it doesn't have to be sport. I used to read Narnia and Roald Dahl and Lord of the Rings, and and then you kind of use all that you've learned there, a way to tell a story, a way to tell a story about a person who has perhaps a sad side or a dark side to him or her, and you figure out exactly how to shape it, and then it comes out in your conversation. Because, see, listen, you can have the best intentions and you speak to somebody, say I'm speaking to Jamie Alter, and within 15 minutes, if I manage to piss him off, he'll be like, end of interview, right? So you also need to have the know-how, the nous to kind of
Bingo.
extend it. I mean, as I say in this book, like, sort of gave me 15 minutes, and 55 minutes in, there was a knock on the door, and they said, Barkha Dutt wants to interview you now. And he looks at the door, at the publication person, and says, I think Barkha can wait. And then he looks at me and he raises a royal hand as I say, and he says, please continue. So
So
that is basically vindication of your interviewing skills, right? And then it comes across in the writing, I suppose. But yeah, thanks. It's an
and that's
excellent question.
and that's No, and that's a fantastic way to summarize it because, like I said earlier in our chat, Aditya, many people say, "कि sir, आपने अपने journalism career के बारे में बात बताइए, the struggles." And I think the book on so many levels, to people watching it, it does tap into that because I'm like, okay, the venue is different. I wasn't with Aditya at that match, but I've been there. Like you
Hmm.
mentioned, when you get to Chipok, you're supposed to get inside with the accreditation, but to show the accreditation, you have to get that right. And then our dear friend Venkat Krishna B walks by, and then so you get in. If you could just tell, I know what you're going to say because I've been there with you many, many times. Southampton was one of the most fun times we had. But just for the benefit of people watching, not necessarily Aditya that they want to get into journalism, but because so many viewers do ask the question, just tell them. Like Calcutta, you're not getting hot water, right? I've
Hmm.
been there. It was Calcutta, but there are times where boss garam pani kyun nahi aa raha hai? You have to share rooms. You have to wait for cabs. Uber doesn't come up. I've been doing this, so have you, before Uber and Ola came out. So
Yep.
just a bit of not just the struggles, but what we go through. And by the way, hat tip to you for getting in the Gokul trip and the Koshi trip. I mean, I'm looking at Church Street. When I first went there, 2006, I was doing the same things. Oh, you can stand at Temptation Wines at the end of a street and drink, and then you can go to a bookstore. So fantastic anecdotes. But just if you can just quickly let our viewers know the struggles, the highs, the lows, because as you said earlier, it's not just like yes, we get into a AC press box. So journalists do also have to वो थोड़ा पापड़ बेलना पड़ता है ना.
Yeah, it's very difficult, man, as you know. And Southampton, guys, I must say, Jamie nearly missed his flight getting out of there. It was one of the most, it was an adventure by itself, yeah, to try and get him inside a cab so that he can go from the Rose Bowl to the airport so that he can get to the next place. He wasn't just covering India in the 2019 World
Very
Cup.
next day I had a match. Crazy, man.
Yeah, I mean, I was with you, and I remember flagging down random taxis saying, "Bhai sahab, ruk jao yaar, isko to jana hai yahan se." So yeah, it's a lot of that, man. I mean, it's absolutely not easy covering cricket in India, even if you're bankrolled by big publication, as we both were at one point. Um, it, just the vastness of the place and the lack of a real infrastructure makes it difficult, as difficult. It kind of like evens the field for everybody, right? The fan or the journalist covering it. Unless you're a commentator and someone is sending a car to you at 5 in the morning and getting you straight inside the stadium, it gets very, very difficult. But the beauty with a difficult life is it also makes for very interesting stories. There's a reason why you and I both remember Southampton today, 6 years later, right? Like, it stands out. The more the hardships that you kind of get through uh, successfully, hopefully, to get inside a stadium, the more stories you have to tell. And it's very enriching, as I said earlier, like, because then it isn't just about watching that fantastic cricket match, which you know is going to be great in any case. But we all like to travel. You like to go to the West Indies or Australia or South Africa or wherever cricket is played, because those countries have so much to lend to your story, your personal story of having reached that place and watching a match, right? I know there are some journalists who kind of have their blinders on and go straight in, don't see much of the city. We know people like that, but you and I and a majority of us aren't like that. When we get to go to the Caribbean or when we get to go to Zimbabwe, the whole beauty is we
You were
are
the only
there.
one there on that tour, yeah, from print.
Yeah, twice, man. I was very lucky, right? Like in 2010 when the Kohlis and the Sharmas were kids, and then
Right,
again in
correct.
2015 when they were established and they were sitting out, and the other kids were playing. But Zimbabwe is such a fantastic place to travel to, and to go to the Harare Sports Club and watch the cricket is just one facet of it. It's easy because it's a tiny country to get to the stadium, but in ours, our journey getting inside the ground itself is so difficult. Or getting an accreditation, right? I work for a magazine, a political weekly. it, we're not high up on the hierarchy of match day
Yep.
access, and like this is again something that has stood out in a lot of interviews that I've given. People were like, I thought it's really easy for you guys. It actually isn't, man. It isn't. But the tougher it gets, and if you're lucky enough to kind of traverse all that adversity to get in, it makes for great stories, man. It makes for really, you can live in the Taj Mahal hotel and go straight to the Wankhede and come back, and I don't think you have many stories to tell. No, I mean, but if you're
Maybe.
staying in the back of Beyond in some Kandavli, taking like a local train to get there, and you're not sure if you're going to get in, and then you get in and you watch Mohammad Shami bowl that fabulous spell, yeah, your day's made, man. You wash ashore at Gokul's at the end of the day, which seems to be a bar that you like too, and you feel like you've had an entire day. You've had experiences right through the day.
Yep, yep. And that's what this entire book is about, guys. If you're wondering, it is all about experiences. Very quickly from this book, your favorite chapter or favorite match, and I'm sure they might even be overlapping.
My favorite chapter is Ahmedabad. It's not my favorite match for a host of reasons,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it was a lot of fun to write about that culture, that place, as they were hosting all these big matches, and how the people on the street kind of reacted to it. Um, like you said, the chapter kind of starts in a very interesting way during Garba, and it was really one of my most favorite moments, right? Like where I was just sitting there in the car and I was witnessing what was happening in the other car. Absolutely beautiful. It is a travelogue. At the end of the day, it's
yeah.
very representative of us as a people, and us as a people change all over this country. In Ahmedabad, I got to see some, fantastic things. My favorite match was India, Sri Lanka, and Bombay, just because of Mohammad Shami, man. Every time he did his thing, it, I mean, I've been lucky enough to like cover absolutely, man. That hand movement with that perfectly like arrow straight seam with those back revs that he gave on it, whatever magic he was doing, that wizardry that he was doing. I've been lucky enough, as I was just trying to say earlier, to watch Nadal and Federer and Djokovic in their prime in Grand Slams, winning Grand Slams. I will put the experience of watching Mohammad Shami at that World Cup up there with watching like Federer's artistry. It was absolutely the same. That was a game in which India made about 300, I think, and then bowled these guys out for 50, the Sri Lankans. And it was, I mean, it was just pure bliss, like to watch Shami do what he did. And plus, Wankhede is my home ground. So
Alagi feeling है वहाँ पे. Yeah.
ekdam alag feeling, boss. I mean, and we were lucky enough to be there during the 2011 World Cup too. So like, those memories come like washing in, tiding in very quickly. And then the same opposition again, right? It's Sri Lanka. But like we also saw where the Indian team has gone in that space of 12 years, and where Sri Lanka at that point kind of like stayed back. But I think it was the difference between the two teams was just how incredible India's like talent pool really is, and how we've grown as a cricket nation. So yeah, the Bombay game for sure.
And whispered softly, the final of 2019, 2023 World Cup should have been at the Wankhede, but we can talk about that some other day.
I
Guys,
certainly think.
the book is called Gully Gully. It's out now. Beyond the book, you can go to the Open magazine and read Aditya Iyer's fantastic work. I had an absolute blast reading your first book, and I wish you many, many more books. And let's not meet just on these video calls or in World Cup press boxes every 4 years. I'm
Oh
also
yeah.
at fault, but let's catch up at some watering hole. Thank you once again for your time, Aditya.
Thank you, Jamie. This means a lot to me, man. Thank you.